Greetings to our viewers worldwide. It's the fourth Monday of the month, and what does this mean? It's time for Connetics College. We are 9.09er, and we'd like to thank Connetics College for inviting us to conduct free classes on various English examinations. So there's IELTS, OET, PTE, and TOEFL. All four of them are now accepted by CGFNS if you're applying for USA Visa Screen. With me for tonight is Sir Marlon Viardo. He is the head of 9.09ers TOEFL program. So what is it that you're supposed to expect both of us to talk about for tonight? We're going to compare IELTS and TOEFL. What's good if you join this interactive discussion? Apparently, you can ask questions related to the examination. I have taken the IELTS, and Sir Marlon right here has taken both IELTS and TOEFL. Now, we're going to give a free subscription to our Platinum Online Review Program. All you have to do is to tag as many friends as you can. And just in case you have any questions regarding the examination, all you have to do is to use the comments section. Now, I'll turn you over to Sir Marlon for an overview of TOEFL IBT. Sir Marlon?
All right. Good evening to all our viewers. I should also say good day, regardless of your location. I'm saying good evening because, of course, we're broadcasting from the Philippines. And, of course, as Sir Irvin mentioned, I'm here to talk about the TOEFL just to give you an idea of what it's all about. So, the TOEFL IBT, also known as the Test of English as a Foreign Language, internet based test, is an exam primarily conducted through a computer. It is used typically by people as a proof of English proficiency. It's very popular among people who are planning to apply for student visa in the United States of America. But as of late, it's also becoming more popular because it's becoming used or it's being used as a proof of English proficiency for healthcare professionals who want to pursue a career in the US. It's also now being used for people who want to apply for permanent residency in Australia. And of course, for teachers who want to become educators in America, the TOEFL IBT is also a viable option. And similar to the IELTS, it tests your four skills in English, namely reading, listening, writing, and speaking. It starts off with the reading exam, where you are required to answer questions using information from three academic passages, followed by the listening section of the test. And during this juncture of the exam, you will answer questions using information from five recordings. And then you're going to have a 10-minute break. Then you're going to have to deal with the speaking section where you're going to answer four questions. And then you have the writing section where you're going to produce two written outputs in response to two tasks. The overall length of the TOEFL IBT is approximately 3 hours. And if you're planning to take the exam in the Philippines, the exam will set you back by 225 US dollars. The maker of the exam, ETS, accepts payments by credit card or debit card. And if you're going to take the exam, the good thing about it is you're going to answer all four sections during your test day. That means you don't have to worry about coming back to the test center. All sections will be dealt with during your exam day. And another thing worth mentioning about the TOEFL IBT is that we have free resources right now in the Philippines, although still limited. We have a Facebook group called TOEFL Study Group Philippines, and I would like to invite everyone to be part of that so you can get free resources and information about the exam. And at Niner, we also have a very useful book called the TOEFL Speaking and Writing Guide, which is available on Shopee and Amazon. It contains a lot of sample answers for the speaking and writing section. And we can assure you that all the sample answers are rated 26 plus because I myself have taken the exam and all the answers that you will find in the book were created by yours truly. So that's pretty much a quick overview of the exam. Is there anything else that I should be covering, sir? Anything that we should mention to our viewers?
Okay, for some of you who might be wondering what am I doing on my iPad, I am sharing the link to various Facebook groups in order to encourage people to join our free discussion for tonight. So, I heard earlier that Sir Marlon gave you an overview of the four components of TOEFL IBT. Now, an interesting case in point. If you're going to the United States of America, the most important subtest is speaking. So, Sir Marlon right here is going to discuss with you guys what's the difference between IELTS speaking and TOEFL speaking. Knowing that TOEFL has what we call integrated nature as compared to the IELTS with merely an independent nature. So, Sir Marlon, will you please give our live viewers an idea? What's the main difference between IELTS speaking and TOEFL speaking?
All right. So Sir Irvin actually brought up something very interesting. Prior to taking the TOEFL IBT, I have never experienced seeing the words integrated and independent used in such a manner. So let's start first with the IELTS because it's very popular among healthcare professionals. So when Sir Irvin mentioned independent, this pertains to questions that you answer using your personal knowledge and experiences. So in the IELTS exam, all of the questions are pretty much independent questions in nature because to answer them, you're only going to rely on the things that you know. And for those who don't know, the IELTS is, of course, for the speaking section, composed of three parts, namely speaking part one, speaking part two, and speaking part three. Wherein in speaking part one, you're going to be asked about stuff about you. Where do you live? What do you do for a living? What's your educational background? In speaking part two, you're going to be given 1 minute to prepare your talking points for a specific topic, and you have to discuss it for 2 minutes. And then for speaking part three, you're going to answer questions related to the topic of speaking part two. And again, all of these questions are pretty much independent. You don't have to rely on a specific source to answer these questions. Now, what about the TOEFL speaking section? How is it different from the IELTS? So, number one, with the TOEFL, you are given time to prepare your answers. Whereas with the IELTS, you have to be really spontaneous. The moment that the examiner asks you a question, you have to respond right away. In the TOEFL IBT, you are given at least 15 seconds to prepare your response, and then you're also given a specific amount of time to discuss your answer. The first question in the speaking section is independent, very similar to the IELTS, meaning to say you will draw on your personal experiences or knowledge to answer the question. However, the next two tasks, or the next three questions rather, they're all integrated in nature. What does integrated mean? The test takers will provide you with sources and you will get your answer from these sources. In question number two of the speaking section, you will listen to a recording and you will read a passage for about 45 seconds, summarizing the content of those two sources. The same thing will happen in question three. And by question number four, you will listen to a lecture spanning for about 2 to 3 minutes, and then you will summarize the content of that particular passage.
So, Sir Marlon, my understanding is if you have poor listening and reading skills, your performance in speaking will definitely be affected. Did I get that right?
Yes, actually, I think that's the interesting part about the TOEFL IBT. Whereas the IELTS focuses solely on your speaking skills in the speaking section. With the speaking section of the TOEFL IBT, strong listening and reading skills will also come into play.
But if this is the case, I'd like to ask how come TOEFL is actually considered the second most popular English examination worldwide? For the benefit of our live viewers, there are so many English tests. There's IELTS, OET, PTE, TOEFL, CELPIP, there's Duolingo, there's TOEIC, there are so many. But how come TOEFL, based on your observation, is considered the second most popular with the second highest number of candidates taking the examination worldwide?
Well, we really do not have concrete data to back this up, but if I were to guess, I think it has something to do with the age of the TOEFL IBT. It happens to be one of the oldest English exams
Mhm.
out there. Not to mention that I think there are people who are more comfortable with the fact that they can prepare answers in the speaking section. Obviously, with the IELTS, you don't have to do that. And maybe some people are more comfortable with a more conversational approach to a speaking exam. But then we have to remember that there are people who would rather prepare their notes before talking. So maybe that's why the TOEFL is still popular even up to this day. And I guess another factor that affects the popularity of the TOEFL is even before we got wind that it's being used as proof of English proficiency in other countries outside the US. I think Asian countries like China, Japan, and Korea tend to favor the TOEFL more than the IELTS, and it has probably something to do with the presence of test centers in those countries.
Thank you for that, Sir Marlon. Now, before we continue, we'd like to greet our live viewers worldwide. Kindly mention your name, kindly mention your location, use the chat box or the comments section. At the same time, for those of you who are already decided, let us know. Are you going to take IELTS or are you going to take TOEFL? And if IELTS, why? Or if TOEFL, let us also know why this is your choice. So far, Sir Marlon and I have been discussing IELTS versus TOEFL. And this is an interesting discussion, knowing that now you have more than one option. If before CGFNS required IELTS for US visa screen, now you may use your results for OET, PTE, and TOEFL to secure your visa screen. Now, speaking of visa screen, if you are a healthcare practitioner planning to go to the United States of America, then you are on the right Facebook page. This is Connetics USA Nursing, one of the largest in the world. And I'm not just saying Philippines, I'm saying in the world. Recently, Connetics was awarded as one of the top 1,000 companies in the United States of America. So, kudos and hats off to the people behind Connetics. Hello there, Miss Tanya. I hope you are having a great time. Now, we'd like to invite everyone, if ever you have not made your first step in going to the United States, all you have to do is to visit this link. It's cusa.link/niner. With this, all you have to do is to upload a copy of your resume or your curriculum vitae, and rest assured that there are representatives from Connetics who are going to message you and schedule you for interview. So going to the United States of America is as easy as that. It all starts with you visiting cusa.link/niner. Now, let's take a look at some of the comments. Okay, Miss Helena Marzo is watching all the way from Davao City. So,
Hello.
guys, we have 32 live viewers right now. If you have questions, feel free to use the comments section. If you have some insights, you'd like to share your ideas or opinions, we welcome all of these because this is the reason why you're joining the live and interactive discussion. Obviously, the recorded version of this will be uploaded right after the Facebook Live session, but it's an entirely different story when you're joining the live discussion because you ask questions, we get to answer them for you. So far, we have talked about speaking as the most important subtest in TOEFL. Now, or in going to the United States in general. If you're taking IELTS, the required band score is a 7 in speaking and 6.5 overall, regardless of your grades in listening, reading, and writing. However, if you are taking OET or occupational English test, let it be known that there is no such thing as overall band score in OET. That's primarily the reason why, if you're taking OET, you have to get a grade of B or 350 in speaking, or a grade of C plus or 300 in listening, reading, and writing. If it's PTE is not graded from 1 to 9, but instead from 10 to 90. So the required band score, if you'd like to work as a nurse in the United States, it's 55 for the overall band and at least 50 in all of the four components. What about TOEFL? Sir Marlon, what is the required band score for nurses who would like to take TOEFL in going to the United States?
Well, we actually have good news for them, sir. So, in the past, nurses were required to get a score of 26 over 30 in the TOEFL speaking section. Now, for those who are not familiar, let me just quickly explain that the difference between the TOEFL and the IELTS is that the IELTS uses a 9-band scale, meaning to say 9 is the perfect score, the highest possible score. Obviously, a 0 is the lowest score, which you will attain if you did not take the test or if you absolutely did not answer any questions. By contrast, in the TOEFL IBT, per section of the exam, the highest possible score is 30, the lowest is 0, and the total score in the TOEFL IBT, if you want to get a perfect performance, would be 120. 120 because again, we have 4 sections and the perfect score for each section is 30. Now, going back to my original point, originally, healthcare professionals were required to get a 26 over 30 in the TOEFL speaking section. However, due to recent developments, that score requirement has been lowered. CGFNS now requires healthcare professionals, particularly nurses, to just get 24. That's 2 points lower than the original required score, 24 over 30 in the TOEFL IBT speaking section. And how is that different from the IELTS? In the IELTS, you're graded based on four things when you're speaking: fluency and coherence, lexical resource, grammatical range and accuracy, and pronunciation. Each grading criterion, you will be graded individually from 0 to 9. How about the TOEFL IBT? You will be graded holistically based on topic development. How good are you at connecting ideas? Are your answers making sense? And then we have language use. This pertains to your ability to use different words and to observe the rules of English grammar. And finally, of course, we have delivery, which is focusing on your pronunciation and ability to talk without pausing a lot. So those are the very important things that you have to keep in mind if you want to take the TOEFL IBT and if you need to get a good score in the speaking section of the exam.
Thank you for that, Sir Lone. We've just talked about the speaking subtest. Now let's go to the written exams. There's listening, reading, and writing. Let's begin with IELTS listening. In the acronym IELTS, letter I stands for the word international, which means to say you get to expect accents all over the world in IELTS listening. So there are native accents like American, British, Australian, Canadian, or Scottish or Irish. But at the same time, don't be surprised if they are non native speakers, say, for instance, Europeans or, excuse me, Africans or Latinos or even Asians who talk in English using their local accent. That's how it is in IELTS. But what about in TOEFL, Sir Lone? I heard that TOEFL is an American product. So does this mean it's purely American accent in TOEFL listening?
Well, if we visit their website, sir, they officially say that you will encounter a range of accents from native speakers. So similar to the IELTS, you can expect people who speak in Australian, British accent, you have the Canadian accent, and of course the North American or popularly known as American accent. But based on my experience and the experience of our TOEFL coaches at 9.09, so far it has been nothing but people with an American accent. And unlike the IELTS, where you stated that there will be non-native speakers that are using English in the listening section, here it's purely native speakers. Why is that? The primary purpose of the TOEFL, even before it got this popular, was it's used again for applying for a student visa. And that's why they try to mimic test and academic situations in the exam. Therefore, expect encounters with American speakers in the US if you're also going to pursue a student visa there. And having said that, that's why the people in the recordings that you will hear use mostly the North American accent.
Thank you for that, Sir Lona. Before we go to reading and writing, I'd like everyone to know that you can take IELTS on paper, IELTS on computer, and recently IELTS online test at home. But what about TOEFL, Sir Lone? Is it possible to take the IELTS on, TOEFL on compute, TOEFL on paper version, or can the candidates take the TOEFL test at home?
Well, that is actually possible, sir. Recently, the TOEFL company or ETS launched a paper-based version of the TOEFL IBT. However, it's only available in selected countries, namely
Mm-hmm.
Colombia, India, Mexico, and the United States. So unfortunately, here in the Philippines, we have no access to the paper-based version of the exam. For our viewers who are in the four countries that I mentioned, that option is available to you. There's also the mention of the TOEFL IBT Home Edition. Yes, it is possible to take the home-based version of the TOEFL IBT. It's similarly structured to the mainstream version of the exam. However, according to CGFNS, at the moment, they're not accepting test results from the home-based version of the exam. So for our medical professionals watching right now, your best option is the traditional TOEFL IBT, which is administered in test centers.
Great. Now, before we move on to the reading subtest, I'd like to encourage our live viewers to ask questions because if you noticed, Sir Marlon and I did not prepare any PowerPoint presentation. Why? We get to think that PowerPoint presentations are relatively boring. So, what's the fruit of the discussion? The heart and soul of the discussion, apparently, the questions coming from the live viewers because we want to know what you are interested in. So, keep on using the comment section. Let us know what you think of IELTS and what you think of TOEFL. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. So, Sir Marlon, let's go to the reading subtest. A lot of IELTS candidates find true, false, not given, and matching headings challenging in IELTS reading. But do these candidates expect to encounter true, false, not given, and matching paragraph headings in TOEFL IBT?
No, Sir Irvin, the funny thing is when I hear people complaining about the true false not given questions in the IELTS, this is what I'm going to tell them. You never know true pain in a reading exam until you've taken the TOEFL IBT. As someone who got a perfect score in the IELTS reading section, it hurts my ego that I wasn't able to get a perfect score in the TOEFL IBT. It's that more difficult when it comes to reading. Yes, let's admit the true false not given can be quite tricky, but it pales in comparison to what the TOEFL offers. All right. So the TOEFL IBT reading section has, like I said, three passages, and you're going to answer questions within a limited time frame. And I think what makes it more difficult than the IELTS. So see, guys, we're being transparent here. We're not sugarcoating anything, but the difficulty that I'm pertaining to is based on my personal experience. It doesn't have to mean that it's going to be difficult for you, but we're going to be transparent here. So the TOEFL has unscored questions. That's what makes it a little bit unpredictable, unlike the IELTS. The IELTS has been consistent since its creation. It always has three passages and you have 40 questions. That's not the case with the TOEFL IBT. There will be exams where you will get four passages. In the listening section, typically you have five recordings. Sometimes you're going to get six. If you're getting more than the standard, you have what they call unscored questions. Unscored questions, as the name implies, have no value, but you have to treat them like actual questions because there's no way of distinguishing them and telling which are the worthy questions or the valuable questions from the unscored questions. So this adds to the level of difficulty of the exam. Now, why do these ETS people add unscored questions, sir? Are they here to torment my life as a medical professional? No, according to the personnel at ETS, the purpose of the unscored questions is to maintain the level of the difficulty of the exam across the board. So, with the reading section, although you don't have true, false, not given, there could be questions that you are exerting a lot of effort into answering, but in the grand scheme of things, they don't contribute to your total score. So that's number one. Number two, the kinds of questions that the TOEFL have include what we call the inference questions. And the IELTS, fortunately, does not have a lot of this. So what is an inference question? It requires you to draw conclusions given from evidences presented in the passage. Unlike the IELTS, the reading passages are very straightforward. However, you need to have the ability to recognize synonyms and paraphrased information. Now, take that, plus the fact that the answers are not directly stated and you have to figure them out by drawing conclusions, then the reading section does become a little bit challenging. And there's also vocabulary questions in the TOEFL IBT, which is not the case for the IELTS. So if your vocabulary is kind of limited, well, again, the TOEFL is really going to give you a hard time when it comes to its reading section. But do find comfort in the fact that the listening and speaking sections are probably just as difficult as the ones in the IELTS. And when we talk about the writing section, I have good news for everybody watching us right now.
Okay, so before we move on to the writing subtest, I'd like to thank Sir Marlon for his honesty and transparency. Because most of the time, whenever I watch videos on YouTube and TikTok, or whenever I attend FB live sessions, some of the speakers tend to sugarcoat the information. But here we have someone who has taken both IELTS and TOEFL and sharing his personal experiences and insights. So, we'd like to remind everyone that these are our observations, and it's totally up to you to do your research. You can uh, have sample practice tests for IELTS and TOEFL, and from there, you decide. Before we proceed, for those of you who are joining us just right now, this Facebook Live session intends to compare two of the most popular English examinations worldwide. There's IELTS and TOEFL. For the longest time, you get to see Facebook Live sessions focusing on IELTS or OET or PTE, but we must not forget TOEFL, because what's the good news? Recently, the required band score in the speaking subtest was actually reduced from 26 to 24. And if ever you have plans of going to the United States, but you have not made your first step yet, all you have to do is to visit the link cusa.link/Niner, upload a copy of your resume and curriculum vitae. Anytime soon, a representative from Connetics is going to reach you for your initial interview. So, Sir Marlon earlier mentioned that there is a good news in the writing subtest. So, Sir Marlon, let's hear about this good news in TOEFL writing.
So this is where everything becomes equal, if that makes sense. And this is what we tell students at Niner. There's really no easier English exam. Although the reading section of the TOEFL IBT is harder than the IELTS, I can argue that the writing section of the TOEFL IBT is easier than the writing section of the IELTS. Why is that? Let's do a quick review. What is expected from you as a nurse when you are answering the writing section of the IELTS? You're going to summarize information from a graph, maybe a pie chart, sometimes a table, and that involves a little bit of math. And then you're going to write an essay composed of 250 words regarding various kinds of topics. So that's writing task two. Writing task 2 of the IELTS is very similar to writing task 2 of the TOEFL IBT. Writing task 2 of the TOEFL IBT is known as the independent task. The difference? The integrated writing section of the TOEFL IBT. Unlike the IELTS, where you sometimes have to do some math and you have to be very knowledgeable on academic terms, here at TOEFL, you have the integrated section of the writing section where you're going to be given a passage and you're going to listen to a recording, and all you have to do is summarize the content of both sources. In my opinion, that is significantly easier than analyzing a bar graph, a table, or a pie chart. Also worth mentioning, the length of your output in writing task 1 of the IELTS is also going to be the same length of your output in the TOEFL IBT, at least 150 words. So for me, that cancels out the difficulty that the reading section offers. And since nurses are not required to really get a specific score for any section of the exam other than the speaking section, if your weakness is writing, then maybe the TOEFL IBT is actually for you.
Great. So that's the good news, guys. Now, we have discussed the relative merits of these two examinations. What are the advantages if you take IELTS over TOEFL? And what are the advantages if you're taking TOEFL over IELTS? Now, let's move on to the speaking subtest. For some of the candidates who have taken other English examinations other than IELTS. Why am I saying other than IELTS? Because for IELTS, speaking is always done in an enclosed room where only the examiner and the candidate are present inside. It's just that for other English examinations, for the speaking subtest, all the candidates speak together inside a computer lab. So I'd like to ask about this, Sir Marlon. In TOEFL, does this also happen that all of the candidates inside the computer lab speak all at the same time?
Yes, this is actually true, sir, because in the TOEFL IBT, you will be taking the test together with other candidates in the same room. And it's possible that in some cases, someone could be ahead of you. Maybe they're finishing questions a lot faster than you. So maybe there's a person who's already taking the speaking section while you're still dealing with questions in the listening section. And admittedly, it could be distracting, but with a little bit of preparation, I can assure you, you can overcome those minute challenges. Besides, you're not allowed to talk that loud anyway in the test taking area. So find comfort in the fact that these people who are also taking the exam, they're not going to talk to the point where you will be totally distracted. There will be, of course, systems in place to prevent other people from disrupting the experience of other test takers.
Okay, so that's interesting to know, but I'd like to ask because in IELTS on paper, the candidates, some of them, depending on the locations, are not provided with individual headsets. For IELTS online tests at home, all the candidates are not allowed to use individual headsets because this may be used as a venue for cheating. Well, the proctors of IELTS will never know if someone is whispering answers directly to your ear. But for IELTS on computer, all the candidates are provided with individual headsets. But what about TOEFL IBT, Sir Marlon? Are all the examinees also given individual headphones?
Yes, sir. That's actually true. They will be issued their respective headsets and they will be given a chance to conduct an equipment check before they proceed with the test proper to ensure that they're given a fair chance to get the score that they want. Another thing that I would like to mention is as soon as the test is over, you will be able to see your listening and reading scores right away. So it already helps you predict if you're on the path to getting the score that you want or not.
Okay. Now, we'd like to check if there are live viewers who have questions. Like what I've said, kindly use the comments section. So far, it's Helena Marzo who has commented. And Sir Marlon, if I'm not mistaken, Helena is one of our TOEFL reviewees already. I'm just
Oh,
not sure if
nice.
she has scheduled a one-on-one coaching with you.
Not yet, but thank you so much for bringing up one-on-one coaching. So this is something I'm very passionate about. It is true that some people can get good scores in an English exam without the assistance of a review center, but these people are very few. In fact, it's hard to pinpoint these successful individuals. My encouragement to anyone watching right now, while it is possible to prepare without spending anything on these exams, whether we're talking about the IELTS, the TOEFL, the OET, or the PTE, nothing beats guided preparation. Because with the guidance of an expert, somebody can tell you if what you're doing is right or wrong. It is easy to copy and learn things from a random website online, but who's to say that you're doing the strategies or you're following the techniques accurately? You need someone to watch you, to listen to you as you perform these techniques. The danger of studying without guidance is you might end up developing bad habits. This is actually the case when I'm coaching test takers. So I've taken the test once, twice, three times already before coming to Niner. And now I'm going to have to help them get rid of these bad habits. I'm not complaining. I just want to save people the trouble of, flunking the exam the first time around or being frustrated with getting rid of a bad habit. Come to 9.09er and we will be more than happy to help you with your test preparation needs, be it the IELTS, the OET, the PTE, or the TOEFL IBT. Especially when it comes to the TOEFL IBT, I myself and my team are trained to help you overcome the challenges of the speaking section. Because unlike the IELTS, where you will be graded solely by a human examiner, the TOEFL IBT requires test takers to be observed and graded by a human rater and a speech rater. So the speech rater is an artificial intelligence technology that will really take note of every single mistake that you make. But at Niner, we have cracked the code. We found a way to overcome the strictness of the speech rater, and we encourage you to join us with your TOEFL journey, just like all our other passers. I think Sir Irvin is familiar with some of my recently hired TOEFL coaches. We have Coach Jamie and Coach Jill, who got perfect scores in the TOEFL speaking section. So this is the caliber of coaches that you will get at Niner. And let's not forget, with our IELTS program, we have coaches that got perfect scores in speaking and writing as well. So save yourself from heartbreak, guys. Don't don't let these exams hurt you. Come to Niner and we will help you. And if ever you've taken the IELTS before for several times, consider taking other exams. I think that would be my advice to people who are watching right now. If you have unsuccessfully attempted the IELTS or the PT or the OET, then the TOEFL is here. It's worth trying. Your dreams do not have to end with the IELTS. All right. So just some words of wisdom for all our aspiring healthcare professionals in the US right now, or people who are planning to go to the US.
Okay, well, just in case we don't have live viewers asking plenty of questions, well, I might have last two questions before we end our Facebook Live session for tonight. But before we do, we'd like to ask you to use the comment section, ask questions, tag your friends if ever some of them are still undecided which English test is supposed to be the best option for them, the one that's going to highlight or maximize their potential in going to the United States. And I'd like to reiterate, if you have not jump started your application to the United States, all you have to do is to visit cusa.link/niner. So as promised, here are my last two questions. Let's begin with the second to the last. Let's talk about statistics. So in the Philippines, because we are based in the Philippines, approximately 60%, 60%. More or less, 60% of the candidates just take the IELTS without ample preparation. And this is statistics that IDP and British Council can attest to. And how do I know? Well, we talk to British Council and IDP on a weekly basis. That's why we are updated with the statistics. But is this working? That around 60% of the candidates take the examination without ample preparation. No, I don't think so. Because if you look at the national average, Philippines speaking subtest is only 6.8. It's just that for nurses who are planning to go to all of these countries that require English examinations, the grade must be 7 in speaking. So now, this is my question, Sir Lone. When some people merely rely on podcast or YouTube or Spotify, how is this experience totally different as compared to the one-on-one coaching with a live instructor and makes use of an interactive learning method?
Well, primarily with a one-on-one coaching session, you have someone who will be able to pinpoint mistakes with your use of the English language. Particularly, are you following the rules of English grammar? Of course, we're also able to take note of mistakes when it comes to pronunciation. One of my most notable concerns when it comes to a lot of candidates is their delivery, because the TOEFL is really very strict with that, unlike with the IELTS. So just to summarize, one of the biggest observations I've made between these two exams, particularly in speaking, while IELTS has probably a little bit more, let's say, focus on your lexical resource and your grammar, with the TOEFL, it's actually focusing more on your delivery. So this is something that you can fix with the help of an expert. And another thing that you can get, or another benefit of being coached, is that, especially for the integrated tasks, you might have trouble identifying important information. And when you're talking, you might end up saying something that could be totally irrelevant or totally unimportant when it comes to fulfilling the requirements of the task. This is something that you can avoid under the observation of a coach. Our coaches will help you understand which things you're supposed to talk about in the integrated task, will help you paraphrase these things effectively. We will help you develop the confidence to even recover from mistakes. Because, Sir Irvin, this is my experience also, not only as a TOEFL coach, but as an IELTS coach. A lot of people stop talking effectively once they made a mistake. They're dwelling on it. It's like a failed relationship. People, you have to move on. You cannot stay on that mistake. And we will help you move forward with our coaching system at 9.09. I would also like to point out, I think I sent a link to our Facebook stream on Connectics. We have, again, a TOEFL book that will definitely give you a better understanding of what an effective response should sound like in the speaking section and how it should look like in the writing section.
Great. And as promised, I told you earlier that we have last two questions. Now I'll move on to the last question. Whenever I watch videos on YouTube and TikTok, or I listen to podcasts on Spotify, or when I'm watching Facebook live sessions, there are online instructors who encourage the use of templates. So, Sir Marlon, what's your opinion on templates in passing or failing TOEFL IBT?
So while templates are highly discouraged in the IELTS, in the TOEFL IBT, we actually recommend it. At 9.09er, we teach speaking templates to our students to help them overcome mental block, because sometimes there are individuals who have a hard time even starting their answer simply because they don't know where to begin. We have templates designed to help you start talking, but of course, these templates are mere guides. They will not help you answer every single thing, and that's where practice and guided coaching comes into play. We're gonna teach you how to understand what to bring up and what to mention during your test. But here's a kicker. Based on my recent research, there have been canceled scores in some Asian countries in the writing section of the TOEFL IBT. And this is under the suspicion of templates being used in the writing section. So, while templates can still be used, it is highly discouraged that you will memorize answers from what appear to be leaked test questions.
Mhm.
The examiners of the TOEFL are trained to identify answers that were taken from leaked questions. So if ever you stumble upon alleged leaked questions veer away from them. Understand that you are equipped with the knowledge and the ability to overcome the challenges of this exam with ample preparation. Please do not come to people who claim that they have lead questions. Not only is it gonna disqualify you from the test, sometimes these people are also scammers. If we're being honest, this is how these people make money. They're gonna make you these promises that you can easily pass an exam, but come on, let's be real. These test centers wouldn't exist if leak answers are readily available. Like people wouldn't be taking the IELTS, TOEFL multiple times if leak answers are readily available. So please be careful when you're dealing with individuals like this. I suggest you report them to ETS if ever you encounter them, and if ever you're tempted to use leak questions or leak answers. Again, there have been cases where test results have been cancelled. It could lead to disqualification. You might get banned from taking the test. So no to cheating, everybody.
Thank you for your knowledge, Sir Marlon. Time flies by so fast. It's been 45 minutes since we started our Facebook Live session. So before we end, we'd like to invite you to number one, 9.09ers free info session tomorrow night featuring myself and Sir Brian Shawson. It's at 8 p.m. So free info session on pronunciation. Number two, so far we only had one active live viewer for the entire discussion, Miss Helena Marzo. Message me tonight or tomorrow, but I'll respond tomorrow morning. I'm going to give you a free subscription to our IELTS Platinum dashboard, knowing that you're currently enrolled at our IELTS online course. So if you have any questions or clarifications, 9.09er is all over social media. We have an account on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. You can also visit our websites, nineronlinereview.com and ninerenglish.com. Don't forget to sign up for your free trial. If you want to send us an email, it's training at nineronlinereview.com. Once again, we'd like to thank Connetics for inviting us every fourth Monday of the month. So 4 weeks from now, 9.09er is going to come back here at Connetics College. But for those of you who are attending for the first time tonight, I'd like to remind you that every Monday there is a designated partner company of Connetics who's going to talk about free classes on NCLEX and English examinations. So every second and fourth Monday of the month, it's the turn of English exam review partners of Connetics. But every first and third Monday of the month, it's the NCLEX Review Center partners of Connetics to conduct free classes here on Connetics College. So once again, we'd like you to visit cusa.link/niner to jumpstart your application to the United States. Once again, this is Coach Irvin and Coach Marlon of 9.09er. We'll see you in 4 weeks right here at Connetics College. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys. Thank you.